Welcome back to Greenlight Studio. Now, you may notice something a little bit different about today's video, and that's because, yes, this is a new set. This is actually my Blu-ray collection and not Ollie's dad's Blu-ray collection, which Ollie was LARPing. And yes, my partner, Ollie, is also not here. But to find out why that is, you're going to have to watch the Greenlight Studio show, which can be found on its designated playlist on our channel. Now, with the release of Toy Story 5, there are 31 movies in the Pixar catalog, and today I'm going to be ranking all 31 from the worst to the best. Now, I have some very passionate opinions on these movies because a lot of these I grew up with, and they're a huge part of why I love film so much and what got me into film discussion as a kid. So some of these opinions might be a tad spicy, but because I own all of this stuff and because I'm talking about this here on YouTube, that means my opinion is objectively right and objectively better than yours. But still, leave your rankings down in the comments below. I would love to see them. With that being said, let's get this puppy started with number 31, the worst Pixar film. Easily. Toy Story 5, the newest one on the list, is the worst Pixar film in my opinion. Now, usually we don't go into spoilers here on this channel without a proper spoiler warning, but today I'm going to be spoiling all Toy Story movies because I can't really explain why I dislike them or like them without getting into spoilers. So if you somehow have not seen those movies, go watch the first 4 movies. It ends at 4, and because I will be spoiling them all, I hold the first 4 Toy Story movies, very near and dear to my heart. I think those movies are just brilliant, perfect, just an insane run of 4 movies with a perfect ending for Woody's character. And I'll get into that later. But this movie just completely unceremoniously ruins that perfect ending. And I think that this is that movie's biggest crime. That is why I just hated this movie's existence. And that is enough to put it at the bottom of this list for me. But I was at least expecting, okay, it's still Pixar, it's still Toy Story. Maybe they'll turn out something good, something where it's like, okay, I can see why that was made. And I was initially intrigued by the whole iPad kid thing that they were going for, because I thought, there's definitely something that they can do with that. But I don't think they handled that messaging very well. But I do think, again, that this movie's biggest flaw, the reason I hate it so much, is because of the character assassination. For really all these characters, any of the side Toy Story characters like Rex, Slinky, Ham, all those guys, I don't even remember seeing the alien in this movie, are completely sidelined. Like, I don't even know if they have a line, most of them, which is okay if you can tell a story that is worth telling either way if you focus on a different character. Like, I think that Toy Story 4 was very much Woody's epilogue, a movie focused on Woody and his character, finishing his character arc, and that was great because it did it so well. But this movie doesn't do that, and it instead focuses on Jessie, which I'm actually okay with. I like Jessie, but there wasn't much of an arc to be finished. I think her arc really was finished with Toy Story 2, where she learned that even though she was abandoned by her old owner, Emily, they're still valued having, love and lost, and then she chooses to go with Woody rather than to the museum. That is the end of the arc right there. She doesn't need to relearn the same lesson in this movie, which that's what they do. They just retread those same emotional beats from Toy Story 2, which is just like really, really bad writing. Really bad writing for a sequel. Just retreading the same emotional beats, the same arcs, the same story. And actually kind of undercuts the tragedy of that story, because later in this movie you find out that Emily, Jessie's old owner, named her kid Jessie. Now, a lot of people, this movie is getting some pretty high praise, surprisingly. A lot of people really resonated with that reveal. I think that it was very poorly executed. I think that it was very much a tell don't show type of thing, and I think that the way she found out was very contrived. But I also think that that is kind of stupid. Naming your child after a toy you had when you were 8 years old. Like, I get that the whole point of this franchise is like the importance of toys, but like, I mean, it's more of a metaphor than anything else, So I just think that's stupid. Who would ever do that? And I don't know if people are talking about that. There's also way too many plot conveniences, way too many gaps in logic. Like, there's a new character voiced by Conan O'Brien, who's named Smarty Pants, and it's like a potty training toy that's like almost a decade old, and it's a very simple toy. And it can somehow connect with a brand new iPad or a LilyPad and send messages and post photos, and it makes absolutely no sense. Like, it makes no sense. It's so stupid. There's a separate subplot about like an army of new buzzes who are like more high tech, and that is also just kind of stupid. Like, this movie opens and they build a ship and sail off an island and then somehow make their way to basically where Bonnie is, and it's completely stupid. And they also like can have a Wi-Fi hotspot, and it's totally stupid. And if you look at the technology in this movie, it actually really doesn't line up with the timeline of Toy Story movies, because in the first Toy Story, it takes place in 1995, Andy was 6 years old. 12 years later, so he's 18 for Toy Story 3, that's 2007, and then 2 years later for Toy Story 5, that's 2009, maybe 10 if we're being generous. And there's no way that it's just stupid. It's so stupid. Even Toy Story 4, which I have said I think is a really good ending, that also has a lot of plot conveniences, a lot of stupid moments. Like, I'll get into that later, but it's not as glaring as this movie. It's not as frequent as this movie, and this movie, it just piles up, and it doesn't counteract those things with really good character writing. The character assassination of Woody, like I just can't look past that to see any of the redeeming qualities for this movie because I'm just so offended by that. Woody is it's between him and Walter White for like favorite fictional character of all time. And this movie just, the way they bring him back is so unceremonious and again, very contrived, very plot convenience. It's really stupid. There's like a walkie-talkie that's between him and Jesse that can somehow have like an infinite range, even though it's like a toy walkie-talkie, and they never exchange this in Toy Story 4. And Toy Story 4 has such like a beautiful emotional ending, and now you watch that and it's like, oh well, no, it's okay because Woody can come back anytime he wants, and he can just communicate with Jesse anytime he wants, you know. And it's like, I don't understand why they would craft such a beautiful ending to completely emotionally undercut it with the next movie. And even Tom Hanks and Tim Allen have said in interviews for Toy Story 5, like, oh yeah, like it was just, that ending was so perfect for Toy Story 4 and we were reading it and we were crying. And then they come back for this movie.
We were all puddles. Yeah. Lee, the director, was there. We were all right there. And I had a surreal out-of-body experience on what would be the last day of working on Toy Story as Buzz. Wow. Something magnificent has come to its conclusion.
No doubt. And now we're continuing with 5.
And really, the worst part is, Woody doesn't serve a purpose in this movie. Like, maybe if they brought him back for a good reason, okay, you gotta do what you gotta do. But, like, they don't. If Woody was not in this movie, it would make no difference at all. They just kind of completely ignored his character growth for the sake of, like, oh, remember when these movies were actually good? For this movie. I have just never been more personally insulted, more personally offended by a movie in my entire life. And you can say that's bias. Yeah, okay, this is one of my bias takes. But you know what? If you're gonna make a bad movie, okay, fine, make a bad movie. But it just makes the movie so much worse, so much more offensive and irredeemable if your movie ruins a previously established great series of films or a great movie, if it undoes the victories of the previous installments. Every other Toy Story sequel expanded on the franchise, added something new, added layers to these characters, added layers to this world, and this movie doesn't do that. It is purely a product of corporate greed rather than putting any actual craft into the storytelling like the first 4 Toy Story movies. And if that couldn't be any worse, there's also a Taylor Swift original song, just corporate slop. This movie, Toy Story 5, 0.5 out of 5 stars. If I can give it lower, I would. Toy Story 5, more like Toy Shitty 5, right? Number 30 is Turning Red. Now, Turning Red, this is another movie that does have its fans, but I just could not stand this movie. I think this movie is so annoying, so exhausting. The worst part of it is that the main character, who I believe her name is May, is just so annoying. They try to make her and her like group of friends quirky, and it's really obnoxious. It's really grating, and they try to do a mother-daughter plot in here, but the messaging is handled really poorly. And this movie also has that really crappy character design that has been replicated in Pixar and in Disney and even sometimes in DreamWorks, where the characters just look so bland and so uninteresting. I really couldn't stand this movie. I don't think I could ever watch it again. The third act is totally stupid, and it's just a stupid, really annoying movie with a really, really insufferable main character. This movie, I'm gonna give it 1 out of 5 stars. Coming in at number 29 is Elemental. This is a movie that I also found kind of annoying. This was kind of a drag, kind of a slog to get through, and just really like basic, really predictable, and so far from how creative the stories and characters were in Pixar's golden age, I guess you could say. It's just a dumbed down version of a very cliched story. It's just a forgettable nothing burger movie that I will never watch again. So 1.5 out of 5 stars. Number 28, I have Lightyear. Now this I think is actually a pretty good concept, and even when I was a kid I was interested in what the source material was for the Buzz line of toys. But this movie does such a terrible job at showing what that would have been. It's not a movie that would have come out in 1995. It's not a movie that Andy would have enjoyed, and it's not a movie that would have inspired the Buzz and Zurg toys. And it actually completely retcons so much of what those toys established in the Toy Story franchise. Like, in Toy Story 2, we learned that Zurg is actually Buzz's father, which is like, they spoofed Empire Strikes Back. Which I guess spoilers for Empire Strikes Back, but... And in this movie, we find out that, spoiler alert for Lightyear, that Zurg is Buzz from the future. And I just don't understand how they can make such a glaring retcon, and just ignore a huge part of, like, the lore, I guess, not to sound stupid, for these characters. It's just that, when I think of this movie, I think of that stupid twist, and just a bad movie. It's very dull, but most importantly, it just, again, retconning the Toy Story movies. Lightyear, more like Shite Year. Alright, at number 27, I have The Incredibles 2. The Incredibles 2. The first Incredibles, which is not that low on the list, is great. It's very mature, a very nuanced film that is actually a lot more adult than people will give it credit for. This movie is not that. It's just so weird to me that Pixar waited 14 years to make a sequel to the Incredibles movie, which I think does have sequel potential. And this is a story they chose to tell. That doesn't really, again, much like Toy Story 5, without being as offensive as that movie, doesn't really expand on anything and doesn't really bring any value to these characters or this world. And also just does that goes and pulls a Ghostbusters 2 and just kind of retcons what was accomplished in the first movie by like making superheroes illegal again, which was just completely stupid. And I hate when sequels do that. Just undo a finished plotline so that you can redo it, retread it in the new movie. It's just so lazy. I'll give it this. It is at least entertaining. Like, I couldn't really say that for Lightyear or like Elemental. When I think about this movie, the thing that I think the most about is the really terrible villain, and that terrible twist. This is like one of the most obvious twist villains, maybe the most obvious twist villain I have ever seen in my life, and it's actually like, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. There's also, I think, way too much time spent on Jack Jack, and they're just kind of exploding that, oh, it's a cute little baby, but it's actually super dangerous and really, really powerful, just to sell toys. And that was, yes, there was an element of that in the first one, but it is just so milked in this movie. Yes, the animation here is more detailed than the first because Pixar got more advanced in those 14 years, but I would actually go as far to say that the animation is better in the first movie. It has more character, and fits that movie's style a lot better. In this movie, it's just a little too clean. It's a little too slick. So just a really lame sequel. I'll give this also the 1.5 out of 5 stars. Hey, Incredibles 2? More like Incredibles poo. Incredibles poo. All right, number 26, I have the movie Brave. Now, there's really not that much to say about this one. And really, there's a reason that nobody ever talks about this movie. It's, again, very dull. It's, I would go as far to say maybe Pixar's most boring film. I don't think the comedy works here. This is one of the first movies I can remember seeing in theaters, so you think I have nostalgia for it, but I have basically none. It at least does the mother-daughter themes better than It at least does the mother-daughter themes better than Turning Red, but yeah, just kind of like a nothing burger movie. I give Brave a 2 out of 5 stars. All right, and we go from one nothing burger to the next nothing burger with number 25, The Good Dinosaur. You know, I said Brave might be Pixar's most boring movie, but this one could also take the cake for that. I hate to use the word dull and lame again, but again, lame and dull. The character design, really bad. And maybe not really bad, but it also contrasts really, really poorly with the very, like, intricate, artsy backgrounds and environment of the movie. I don't like Arlo. He's annoying. I think the main character is annoying. This movie gives another 2 out of 5 stars. Hey, The Good Dinosaur. Or more like the bad dinosaur, right? It's bad. All right, at number 24, I have Cars 2. Now, I remember a time when this movie was universally agreed upon to be the worst Pixar movie, and if you watched any ranking from 7 to 10 years ago, maybe, everybody's list would have this as the bottom. But now it's actually above quite a lot of movies, really, concerning that it's not a good movie. Now, I'm not that big of a fan of the Cars franchise in general, not to spoil this list, but I think this movie's biggest flaw is focusing on Mater, who's not really that enjoyable of a character, not really that funny, Larry the Cable Guy, kind of annoying. But I can at least appreciate that they did do something different with the whole spy espionage thing. Yes, that's stupid. Yes, that is a far cry from the original movie. But you know what? It's at least kind of fun. It's not like Toy Story 5. It's not like Incredibles 2 where they're just retreading. It's something new, and it's not something good, but it's something new. And I could see someone having a good time with this. Notably, this is the movie to end Pixar's golden age. This came out right after Toy Story 3, which you will see much higher on this list. That movie was such a great example of a really, really good sequel. And like finishing so many plot lines, expanding on what was previously established in previous movies, and wrapping up character arcs. We all know why Toy Story 3 is so great. We all know it's a masterpiece. And then for Pixar to have this come out right after that, not even a year later, that's got to be one of the most jarring shifts in quality ever. And it went from really great Toy Story. It went from really great storytelling to kind of just another corporate studio product meant to sell toys. So yeah, I'm giving Cars 2 a 2.5 out of 5. Number 23, I have Finding Dory. Now this is, you can say the same thing for like every sequel that has been on this list so far. Just very much unnecessary, but at least this one, you get a little bit of Dory's backstory, how even though that's like a little bit unnecessary, it's kind of cute. It has cute moments, but it also has a lot of stupid moments. Like the whole truck scene, really stupid. Dory is not as bad as Mater, but not really sufficient enough to carry her own film, if I'm being completely honest. Doesn't really have much to offer, so 2.5 out of 5 stars for Finding Dory. Number 22, I have Elio, which I actually just watched this very recently, maybe like a week ago. The most recent watch on this list, actually, because I had seen every Pixar movie except this one. But you know what? Even though I watched it so recently, I've already forgotten basically everything about this movie. I wrote some stuff down, so I have that, but it is that instantly forgettable. I find this kid to be annoying. Not as bad as Turning Red, but I don't like Elio. I think he's annoying. And hearing his name just reminded me of Call Me by Your Name, so I was just constantly reminded of a much, much, much better movie. And I think the emotion in this one is pretty forced. Like, there's this whole ending goodbye where Elio says goodbye to the aliens, and they never spent like any time together, except one of the aliens. So like he's saying goodbye to his characters, and it's like, who even is that? Who even is this character that we're saying goodbye to behind really sad music? Lots of tropes. There's the whole dead parent trope that is just like eye rolling at this point. Like, yeah, it's a Disney movie. Kid's parents are gonna be dead. There's the liar revealed trope, the third act. Misunderstanding where the main character is revealed to be a liar, but no, he had good intentions. There was a good talking heads needle drop. I was impressed by that. So good pool. I mean, I'm sure you've noticed that all of these movies basically on the bottom of this list, they're all Pixar's newest movies or newer movies, and this just feels like a children's movie, unlike Peak Pixar, where those are movies for everybody. Some of them even you could say movies for adults that kids could still watch. This movie feels like a kid's movie. Elio, 2.5 out of 5 stars. Elio, more like Semelio. At number 21, I have Hoppers. The newest Pixar movie other than Toy Story 5. And another movie where I don't have much to say because it is kind of a forgettable doll movie. I didn't find the humor to really work. I didn't find the emotions to really work, and those are actually really forced. Like, it felt they had this whole opening section, where it was just kind of bad exposition, but it was also like, oh, this is the sad part. This is where you cry, because it's showing like this girl and her, I think, grandma, and it's just so corny. It's just so out of place, and it's just so, hey, this is the Pixar part where you get sad. Again, human designs, very lame character designs, and just kind of like another kids movie. I don't know. Actually, just yesterday released a quick review for Minions and Monsters, which wasn't that great, but like, if you told me that the third Minions movie was going to be better than both Pixar movies that came out this year, I wouldn't believe that. That's crazy. Hoppers gets a 2.5 out of 5 stars. Hoppers, more like sloppers, right? All right, at number 20, I have Cars 3. Now, this is a movie that I can appreciate on some level because it does actually expand on a character from the first movie, and then they completely ignore Cars 2, basically, which makes this trilogy feel kind of lackluster. And they make it about retirement, and they make it about aging, which I think that other Pixar sequels do much better. But, I can appreciate that it's there. But ultimately, I think that it's just kind of predictable. It doesn't really say much. It doesn't really do much with that. And it had a very aura teaser trailer and aura poster, and it seemed like it was going to be much more mature and much more darker than it actually ended up being. It's mid, but I also, again, I'm not that connected to the Cars franchise in general. So, yeah, Cars 3, I'll give it a 2.5 out of 5 stars. Number 19, I have A Bug's Life. Now, we're finally getting to a movie on this list that I would say, all right, it's decent. It's pretty good. But it's also the first movie on this list from Pixar's Golden Age, from their really peak run. And as you can see, it is the weakest from that. It is a standout as kind of a forgettable throwaway film. It's just fine. This also does that third act liar reveal trope, which I really hate. I think the villain here is pretty good. The villain, though, he was voiced by nobody. Nobody voiced him, which is interesting. Nobody voiced this guy, but he was a good villain. You can actually already see like a very big step up in an animation from the first Toy Story movie, because this was the second movie released by Pixar, and they've already upped their game in animation. But it's forgettable. It's a reason. There's a reason this is the least talked about from that era of Pixar, and probably just the movie from that run of films that has the least substance. So I'm just gonna give this 3 out of 5 stars. All right, number 18. Now, this is the first opinion in a while that I actually might get thrown a little bit of shade for, and that is the first Cars movie. Now, I'm glad that we got here so that I can finally be done talking about these mid-on movies, but this one is cute, it's just nothing special. I like Owen Wilson, so I enjoyed his voice acting in here, and I like the character of Doc. I think this movie, I would venture to say, I would go as far to say this movie is kind of a drag in the middle act, but it's kind of mid. It's kind of mid. I know that a lot of people, especially like in my generation, maybe a little bit older, they have a lot of nostalgia for Cars. But even as a kid, like I knew that the Cars franchise just was lesser than the rest of what Pixar had to offer, and maybe that's because kids like Cars. Maybe that's why they liked it. Like actual Cars. But I was more into the art and craftsmanship of film, so I wasn't so easily won over. I think the most glaring issue of this is that the world building and like functioning of this Cars world, it makes no sense. Like how did they get here? How are these things built if they're cars? And there's been so many conspiracy theories about it, and like fan theories and like, the Pixar theory, Mater is God theory. That's actually a pretty good one. But obviously those things were probably not intentional. It was probably just like kind of not well thought out. None of these things make sense. How do cars fuck? Like who is fucking these cars?
That's something a car fucker would say, stupid car fucker. Well, you know what? You got way more alone time with the car than me, and you probably fucked it.
Weird flashbacks there. This movie gets a 3 out of 5 stars. All right, number 17 is Luca. Now, this is a movie that has its fans, but at the same time is very much not talked about. It's a cute little movie, you know. It's very small scale. It has that poopy character design again. There's some good jokes, you know, some good laughs, but ultimately it's kind of forgettable. I just didn't really get much from this movie. So Luca gets another 3 out of 5 stars. Number 16, I have Inside Out 2. Now this one's actually pretty good. We're getting to some pretty good stuff, pretty good territory. I just think that this movie, it's a good movie for kids to watch. You know, it teaches them about, you know, kind of puberty, kind of growing up, but just those emotions that come with that and the importance of those emotions. But I think this has the classic sequel retreading problem because this doesn't really add anything new. You know, in the first movie we learned that, oh yeah, we consider sadness a negative emotion, but that's actually really important because you can't have the happy times without the sad times, and sadness is there for a reason. This movie just does that same thing, but with anxiety, and it does in a very similar way. It has kind of similar emotional beats, and I think that it just kind of retreads what that first movie did, and it's a pretty solid retread. But I'll talk about Inside Out a little bit later. Get one of my biggest issues with these two movies out of the way. But yeah, I mean, I would give this a very low 3.5 out of 5, maybe like a 3.25 out of 5. There's something there. There's something there. All right, we're more than halfway through this list with number 15, which is Onward. Now, this is a pretty sweet movie. It's though I think the voice acting is not very good at all. I think it just feels like celebrity voice casting. Doesn't feel like Pixar. But this movie is kind of a nothing burger until you get to the end. And it's a decent nothing burger. You know, it's not a miserable nothing burger. But this movie is completely carried by the ending, which I think is actually like really, really smart and really emotional. And yeah, the ending's good. The rest of the movie, kind of nothing. But nice, emotional, subversive ending with a really good message. I'm giving this one same rating as Inside Out 2, a low 3.5, but I'm gonna hit it with a 3.25 out of 5 stars. Number 14. Now this is a movie that I used to be very much down on. I used to dislike this movie, but I've come around on it. You know, I've seen some of its merits, and I appreciate it more now. And that movie is the first Inside Out. I think this basic concept is pretty creative. However, I don't think that it is sufficient enough to carry 2 entire movies because you are just kind of making your characters' basic emotions, which they do a good job of giving some of them somewhat layers, but I think that the concept's a little dragged out. It has a good message for kids that I mentioned in Inside Out 2, which I like. You know, I like that message. However, my biggest issue with both of these movies is that I find the 2 main characters really, really irritating. I really hate joy. I really hate sadness. The other characters, I mean they're okay, but I cannot stand joy. Like every line of dialogue that she has is just so grating. Sadness also super annoying, but it's solid. I see the appeal, but I just can't get past the annoying characters. Again, this one gets 3.25 out of 5 stars. All right, number 13. There is such a huge gap between this and the rest of the list. Like I think the gap from 14 to 13 is huge gap in quality because all of these movies up 13 and up, I would say I love, or at least really, really like, really good movies. So I know people who would have this movie at number 1, and that's okay. Really, if you had these movies as your top 13, any order you have them in, I wouldn't really disagree with necessarily. With that said, coming in at number 13 is Finding Nemo. I know, it's a fan favorite, but all these movies are so good, it's just, I can't believe it myself that it's this low. But, this is just a very sweet movie. Like, it's just very, like, heartfelt and sweet. It's also very lively and vibrant. Like, I really like this world and the characters and the things that they stumble across, you know, like, it's a vibrant, lively movie that just has a lot of heart. The emotions work really, really well in this movie. That opening scene is so devastating, but then again, very heartfelt at the end. And I could imagine that this would hit very, very hard as a parent more than anything else. So I don't really have complaints. I don't really connect with this movie as much as all the other ones above this list, and that's going to be a lot of the complaints for the rest of these movies because they're pretty close to perfect, actually. Number 12, I have Soul. Now, in this section of the list, where it's great movies, like I said, this is the newest one, and one of the few that came out after Toy Story 3 that I think are great movies. I still can't believe that this movie is this low because I really love this movie. This sticks out in Pixar's post-COVID slop era where they just all went to Disney Plus and they were all kind of slop. This is the only genuinely really good one. I would say that this is maybe Pixar's deepest and most contemplative film, tackling things like the meaning of life and our relation to death, the fear of death. And there's maybe one exception to that statement, which I'll get to later. The piano scene at the end is actually really beautiful and made me cry a little. Like, I'll be honest, like I cried a little bit. However, this one, the flaws kind of bring it down a little bit. I think the body swapping plot in the second act is dumb and too goofy for what the rest of this film is going for. Also, the character 22 does not really do anything for me. Can be a little bit annoying. Just does not really fit in this movie. But still, I'm giving this a high 4 out of 5. Also, I forgot to say Finding Nemo. That's also a 4 out of 5. I forgot to take my star rating, but number 11. And again, like I'm just sitting here just flabbergasted that this movie I love so much doesn't even make it to the top 10. But number 11 is Monsters University. Just very, I would say, this movie people have come around to it, but I would still consider this underrated, and I would definitely say this was under talked about. I actually think that this adds a lot of layers to Mike and Sully's characters, as well as their dynamic and their friendship. I even think this adds to Randall's character and makes Randall a better character, which I kind of forgot about before I rewatched this. And it does all these things that like reference the first movie and connect to the first movie, and it doesn't feel like fan service. I would say the only exception to that would be the Roz cameo at the end. Feels like a little bit like, okay, yeah, that's kind of nostalgia bait fan servicey. The rest of it is like crafting like an actually really good prequel. And that's not what you would expect from Pixar at all, or from Monsters Inc. for them to do a prequel, but it makes so much sense when you see it. You know, it's not as tight or as fun as the first movie. Like the new characters introduced are kind of lame. You know, they're not really memorable, but I really like the way that they focus on Mike's character, and I love the themes in this movie. And I think they're actually like really surprising to be in a movie that is considered for kids. Like the way that Mike tries so hard to accomplish and reach his dreams, and the fact that he's still at the end, he still doesn't do it. Like he's not scary, which yes, you can get into. Obviously, Mike Wazowski would be scary if you saw him in your room in real life, but this is a different world. So I'll accept it. But I just think like the idea of not accomplishing your dreams and not being able to do anything you put your mind to is like really mature. But Mike, he still, even though he wasn't great at that one thing, that doesn't mean that he couldn't still be great in general. And seeing that reflected in the first Monsters Inc. movie, where he is bringing value to Sully and to the workplace, it's like, and even the ending where he kind of takes over when Monsters Inc. Scare Floor becomes the Laugh Floor. Like that's actually like really well thought out. And you would think that like they were planning this all along, or they had this kind of backstory in their minds. Yeah, just like great messaging and great character work, which I think is really what carries this movie. And this is it's a low bar, but I would still say this is the best prequel of all time, except for like Better Call Saul, which again, low bar. There aren't that many great prequels out there, but high 4 out of 5 for Monsters University. We are now in the top 10, and my number 10 is Coco. When this movie came out, this was actually my favorite movie upon its release. Like this was my favorite movie of all time. So if young me saw me put this low, he'd be very disappointed. But you know, I kind of like the hype has died down for me. Even though it's obviously still this high. It's beautifully animated. I think there's an argument to be made that this is Pixar's most beautifully animated film, best animated film that they have so far. Tackles some really potent themes. It's a very moving movie, but I think the third act falls a little short. You know, it gets a little cliche with the whole third act climax, and that is not quite as mature as the rest of the movie. And I also think the messaging is a little problematic, and that's kind of what really holds this movie down for me. I think they set up in the first act how terrible this family is and how they're holding him back from his aspirations of being a musician, and they really make you hate this family. So I think the themes of the importance of family is kind of problematic when you establish a family to be like such terrible people that Miguel had every right to cut ties from. I'm not sure that's a very good message, but still, this movie gets a high 4 out of 5. All right, number 9. Now, these next like 4-ish movies, they were really difficult to choose between, and I have flipped the order around so many times. But with that said, number 9, Toy Story 2. Now, some people have this as their best Toy Story film, and I can't argue with that because those first 4, they're all so good. Now, I think this is the movie where the side cast was best utilized, like Rex and Ham, Slinky Dog, and all those guys. I think that this is one of the best twist villains of all time. It's a great intro for Jessie and Bullseye. This is the strongest lineup for new characters that the Toy Story sequels have introduced, and the whole "When Somebody Loved Me" moment, revealing Jessie's backstory, is the first time Pixar got really emotional and had their big crying moment that they're now famous for. It's a devastating scene that, I mean, I think we all teared up a little bit at, if we're going to be honest. However, I think that compared to the other emotional moments in this franchise, aside from 5, the other moments in this tetralogy, when you compare it to that, it does feel a slightly emotionally manipulative, maybe a little bit emotionally manipulative. Like the whole song, like it's basically a music video, and it is a little bit like, this is sad, cry now. That's mostly because of the song, but it's still great. Like, I'll allow it because it works. This just does exactly what a great sequel should do. It expands on the story, expands on the characters, and is that perfect bridge between Toy Story 1 and Toy Story 3. By expanding on the purpose of being a toy, and Buzz gets to say you're a toy instead of saying you're a toy. Like, that's just great stuff. But then also introduces the ideas of abandonment that is later followed up in Toy Story 3. So it kind of bridges those two movies, bridges those two ideas. For that reason, I think it actually has a little bit less impact than 1 and 3, because because the first one addresses its own themes in isolation, and Toy Story 3 addresses the themes of abandonment and letting go. Much better and much more impactfully because it's actually addressing the things that were set up in Toy Story 2. Because of that original tetralogy, this is the one that I think about the least. It's the one that I return to the least. However, I do think, again, there's an argument to be made that this is the most rewatchable Toy Story movie. I would say that's the first movie, which we'll get to later, but it is a very well-paced movie. The third act, really, really fun, and the cleaning scene, the scene where Woody is cleaned up by Gerald, is just peak cinema. Like, I just want that entire scene just framed on my wall, just playing on loop. It's amazing. But yeah, this one, it gets a 4.5 out of 5. I'm very stingy with my 5-star ratings. Number 8, I have the movie Up. Now, everybody says that this movie is completely carried by its opening scene, by that first 10 minutes. I disagree. Go see any Pixar ranking video, and I can almost guarantee that when they get to Up, they're going to say, yeah, I mean, it's a good movie, but only the first 10 minutes are great. I very much disagree with that statement. I think, yes, the opening 10 minutes are amazing, and you can argue the best part of the movie. The way that the music is used and the visual storytelling is just amazing. But I think it's the rest of the movie that actually delivers on those themes, actually follows up on that heartbreak in the first 10 minutes to deliver themes of like letting go, and how just because one phase of your life ends doesn't mean that there's not still great stuff after that. And I think that, like the scene of Carl's house starting to burn down is so devastating, and like seeing him try to save the things from his wife, like you really feel it. But then later when he has less balloons, I mean, this is kind of spoilery, but I assume we've all seen these movies, when he's low on balloons and then he has to get rid of the stuff in his house, like that's such an emotional scene and such an amazing metaphor. So it's such a heartfelt movie, but at the same time, while also having these emotions, it's also one of Pixar's funniest movies. Even ones that have gotten critical acclaim, like Lion King. I think sometimes when you introduce comedy to such a emotional, dark story, it kind of undercuts the emotional beats of the movie. But I think that this movie somehow balances those tones really, really well, because it's a wacky movie. This premise of the guy floating his house with a bunch of balloons, like it's wacky, and then the talking dogs. It's a very wacky movie, but it somehow works. And I don't know how they do that. Even the character of Doug should be like a really annoying comic relief side character, but he's not. I love Doug. Who doesn't love Doug? And people should talk about this movie in its entirety, not just that opening scene. So, Up, 4.5 out of 5 stars. All right, at number 7, I have The Incredibles. The Incredibles is an incredible movie. It's so great. It's very fun. It's got really good action. It's got great character design, and this is the first time that Pixar focused on human characters. I mean, human characters, the main characters of the story, and because they were so difficult to make look realistic, getting around that, they gave these characters a very cartoonish, comic book-ish design, but it makes it fit. Like, it's not distracting at all. They're very memorable character designs. It's not a movie that's as close to my heart as movies that are above this one, or even like Toy Story 2 or Up. But I have to give this movie credit for being Pixar's most adult film, probably, with amazing themes. And this movie is actually better for adults than it is kids. Like, I would argue that for everything in this top 9, but this one, like, objectively, you can't really argue against that. Like, the opening scene in this movie, Mr. Incredible has to stop someone from committing suicide. And then the entire movie is focused on Mr. Incredible having a midlife crisis, something kids, like, aren't even going to be able to wrap their heads around. And his wife thinks that he's having an affair, and just, like, really surprisingly mature things. It's a movie with a great aesthetic, one of the best superhero movies of all time, but also a really great family drama. So, midlife crisis movies, they're one of my favorites. A lot of the movies, like, I think I have, like, 3 midlife crisis movies in my top 10 of all time. So, it appeals to me. So, 4.5 out of 5 stars. All right, number 6, potentially my hottest take in this entire video, is Toy Story 4. Because a lot of people, they don't really like Toy Story 4. A lot of people say it should have ended at 3. And yes, it could have ended at 3. But 4 is another perfect ending. I have a very, very deep connection to, again, this entire tetralogy, but also this movie. A lot of people grew up with the first 2 movies and then saw 3, and that paralleled, like, them growing up and letting go of their childhood. But for me, I can't even remember a time without the entire Toy Story trilogy. Those movies just always existed to me. Those are always the movies that I had and grew up with. So this movie, seeing this in theaters, was like Toy Story 3 for me. And I have never, ever cried at anything like I have cried at this movie. When I watched the ending of Toy Story 4, I cried all the way home. Like, wee, all the way home type crying. I cried all the way to the theater, cried all the way on the drive home. And then they chose this movie in 6th grade for elementary school movie day. And they showed it to the entire school. And again, second time watch, I cried. I sobbed. And this movie, like, it better be good if it publicly humiliated me like that. It's a perfect end to Woody's arc. The way that he goes from this first movie where he's so selfish and so self-obsessed and so clinging to the idea of being the favorite toy, the number one toy, and then he loses that as the films go on. Buzz replaces him, in a way, as the favorite toy in the first movie, and in the second movie he realizes that he's breaking, and Andy will one day grow out of him. In the third movie, and he does grow out of all of them, and then in the fourth movie he's no longer serving his purpose as a toy. And this movie tackles the idea of losing your purpose in life and grappling with letting go of a past phase of your life, and how it's okay to move on from those things. People hate that ending. They think that it's betrayal, but this movie was just, I think, too subversive and too smart. And when I got to Soul and I said that there was one exception as Pixar's deepest film, I think this is it. I think that this is their deepest, most meaningful film. And I was just shocked at where they went with this movie. But I will admit, it does have flaws. Out of those first 4 Toy Story movies, out of that amazing tetralogy, this is easily the most flawed of those 4. I think what they do with Buzz, that plotline is terrible. I'm not the first one to say that. The whole inner voice thing is really, really stupid, and I hate the way they dumped him down. I think the whole RV thing where the toy is pretending to be the GPS, and then they're like at the pedals, that is so stupid. But I still love this movie for what it represents and the end that it brings to the franchise, and specifically the end to Woody's character arc here. This movie gets a 4.5 out of 5 stars. At number 5, I have Ratatouille. What can I say about Ratatouille? It's just a great movie. This is such a warm movie, I love that it's based around cooking, and those scenes are great. The setting of Paris is utilized so well. It also, again, like a lot of these early Pixar movies, has great themes, and it's not just anyone can cook. It's not just you can accomplish your dreams. It also has great commentary on the power of art and the difference between industrial and personal art. The scene where Ego actually tries the Ratatouille that Remy made, it's been talked about to death, but it's because it's a great scene. It's one of the greatest scenes in Pixar's entire catalog. And he has such limited screen time, but he's still one of the greatest animated villains, I would say. But yeah, great concept, great characters and themes, and just a very comforting, warm watch. 4.5 out of 5 stars. Number 4, I have Monsters, Inc. And we're getting to some peak. We're getting really high, but still, I kind of can't believe this is only number 4 on this list because it's so good. This is possibly Pixar's most quotable and funniest film. I think the voice acting here is amazing from Billy Crystal and John Goodman. And the dynamic is amazing. And maybe the best dynamic in Pixar, even though that's really hard to say because of Buzz and Woody. The character design is so great. I would say this is Pixar's best and most creative concept, as well as the best execution for one of their concepts, and best world building. Like, it's actually so creative. This movie has an amazing screenplay. I think it's a movie that, of this top 10 of this list, it has its theme and messaging least in the forefront. But it still has something to say about the evils of corporations and the insecurities of parenthood. So yeah, it's just a great movie all around. It has an amazing twist villain. The score and the title sequence of this movie is amazing. I would say that the music in this is Pixar's best. The end credit song, If I Didn't Have You, is really good, really funny, and better than You've Got a Friend in Me. I'm just gonna say it. And looking back, guys, let's be honest. The fact that this lost to Shrek as best animated feature for the Oscars' first year of having that category, it should have won. Monsters Inc. definitely should have won. I like Shrek, but in no world is Shrek better than Monsters Inc. and more deserving of that award. And just talking about this movie, I want to rewatch it right now. And if I were to choose any movie from this list to rewatch after finishing this video, I would choose Monsters Inc. How could you not like Monsters Inc? I just don't see how anybody could dislike Monsters Inc. I'm giving this movie a high 4.5 out of 5. All right, number 3. Now these top 3 movies, they have switched around even in just the past few months, switched around so many times. Really, really hard to choose between. In a way, they're all my number 1. And this number 3 actually was my number 1 for a very long time. And then I rewatched movies, and it switched around. But all of these 3 movies are in like the 30s. They're all like in the top 30-something movies ever. So they're subject to change one day, but I'm feeling good about this ranking right now. For my entire life, I have always gone back and forth on whether Toy Story 1 or Toy Story 3 is better. At this point, we know I love Toy Story. And again, I don't even remember a time in my life when I didn't have the Toy Story trilogy. It is like I came out of the womb loving Toy Story. With that said, at number 3, after much debate, it's the first Toy Story movie. Now, either I said Monsters Inc. could be the funniest movie, but I think that this is a contender for that as well. It's either Monsters Inc. or this movie as Pixar's funniest movie. I am almost a grown man, and I've seen this movie countless times, maybe in upwards of 50 times I've seen this movie, and I still laugh. I still laugh at the Mrs. Nesbit bit, my Pixar's best bit. And I love the fact that Woody is kind of not a good person, really. Like, he's a very flawed protagonist, and that's just not something that you see in many children's movies and many family movies. They usually wouldn't make such a, I'm not going to say unlikable character, because Woody is very likable, but such a flawed character that over 4 movies comes to the perfect conclusion for his arc. But then you can still sympathize with him, you can still relate to him, and you can understand his struggle, and even like you're rooting for him. And just the way that is handled is so great. Like, I'm just going to say it. I'm just gonna say it. This is a perfect movie, and I would say that about so few movies. But I genuinely have no qualms with this movie. People complain about the animation; they say it's outdated. I only think that that's because we've had the future of Pixar and the future of 3D animation, and we've seen how far it can come. I don't think this animation is bad. It's just outdated in comparison to future films. So, really, no flaws with the movie. Just an amazing screenplay, such a tight film. It's flawless. So, I got to give this movie a 5 out of 5, a 5-star film. But my number 2 film, the second best Pixar film, and one of my favorite movies of all time, again, is Toy Story 3. Now, after all the Toy Story glaze, many of you might think that Toy Story 3 would be number 1, but it's very close. It's very close. But it lands at number 2. Seriously, I cannot get over how good this movie is, and that they went where they went, and they pulled it off as well as they did. This entire movie is just so melancholic and sad, but especially that first act, just seeing where these toys are now, and really feeling that time between the second and the third movie. Because you can really feel it. How empty Andy's room is, how little toys there are, the scene where Woody is on the phone with Andy, and you can see in his face all the things that he wants to say to him, but he can't. It's so sad, and it's so shocking, so melancholic, so beautifully tragic in a way, and I can't believe they pulled off those emotions in a movie that is considered by many to be a kid's film. Rewatch this movie and tell me that it doesn't hit you. Even something as small as seeing Buster's age, which Buster, I mean, Sasa name, but Andy's dog, seeing his age is kind of like really depressing. So just this movie has that feeling to it all throughout. And it's just, I gotta give credit to that. But the third act is so cinematic and so beautiful. Like I have, again, like I've said, I can't even remember a time in my life when I had not seen these movies, but I still think about that third act all the time. The fight between Woody and Lotso, and the she replaced you. I mean, it's so good, and it's peak. And then especially that trash compactor scene. I mean, watching Woody save Lotso's life, and then I remember as a kid really thinking that Lotso would push that button. I mean, we all did, right? Where's your kid now, Sheriff? Oh, it's peak. It's so peak. And that scene where they're all heading towards the fire, there was a part of us, I think. Well, there was a part of us that knew that they would never go there, but I think we all kind of thought that maybe are they going to kill them? Are they going to die? Are they going to be burnt alive? And yes, they saved them. But just the fact that Pixar went there, just the fact that in a G-rated movie, even considered to kill off these characters in such a brutal way, is like, again, just something I can't even wrap my head around. And it's just such a beautiful scene when they all embrace their death and all hold hands and accept it together. Even though they didn't actually die, it's still emotional just because of that. So it doesn't really undercut those emotions of that scene. But again, just so cinematic, so beautiful. And Lotso, one of the greatest villains in all of cinema. I think he's the greatest villain of any movie on this list. I think he's a top 4 villain of all time, at least in movies. And I can only imagine the impact of seeing this movie in theaters. Like I wish I could have been there, not only to experience the dread of this entire movie. Well, first of all, how fun the very opening scene is, but then the dread of the rest of the movie, and thinking that the toys are gonna die, and then that shocking, insane reveal when Andy sees Woody at the bottom of the box, which is just so well executed, so amazing. But then, especially like, if you grew up with these movies and you were around Andy's age, and you saw this movie, like, that would hit so hard. I almost wish I could have experienced that. See what that would have felt like. Yeah, that would have really hit. This movie also, such amazing animation. I think Toy Story 4 has the best animation of the series probably, but this is a close second. Just the lighting of the daycare and the trash compactor is really amazing. It's the perfect ending for the Andy trilogy. I said Toy Story is a perfect movie. I don't think this is quite perfect. Like, you can nitpick. I wouldn't. But, like, yes, the beginning where all the toys think that Andy was going to throw them away, but Woody could see that it was Andy's mom that misunderstood what the trash bag was, and that's why they want to go to Sunnyside. Like, yes, that is kind of, like, cliched. It's somewhat lazy writing, like, why it was just kind of like a stupid misunderstanding, because like Woody just said, like, oh no, I saw that Andy's mom mistook the bag for a garbage bag, and so you guys, like, yeah, you can nitpick that part a little bit. You can nitpick it's a little too convenient that the aliens were able to use the claw to save them. A little bit, like, yes, you can nitpick these things logically, but it doesn't undercut the power, the emotional power of this movie. And the reason I have just recently chosen this over the first Toy Story movie is, yes, that first Toy Story is amazing, such a great watch, so rewatchable, but this movie is the most emotional film of the trilogy and holds so much more emotional weight than the first one. And for that reason, it's the best Toy Story movie and most of the best Pixar movie of their entire catalog, but just not quite. So Toy Story 3, 5 out of 5 stars, of course. All right, now we've made it to number 1, which I'm sure you have figured out, whether through process of elimination or looking around this room, and while I think that the Toy Story tetralogy, those first 4 movies, are the best thing Pixar has done as a whole, I think the best individual movie is WALL-E. Now, this movie, first of all, beautifully animated. One of Pixar's best looking movies. So many amazing shots. The first act is so beautiful, just amazing visual storytelling with very little dialogue and very surprisingly artsy for Pixar being such a mainstream company. Not something that you would ever see them do today. I mean, it's on the Criterion Collection. I have it right over there, which by displaying those, I did kind of spoil my top 2. But just that first act is so great, and it has kind of got that up reputation where people say, oh, the first act is so amazing, but then after that, once they go to space, it's not very good. I disagree. But I'll get to that a little bit later. WALL-E as a character is just so likable, so endearing. And this romance between him and Eve is just so sweet. Maybe the best movie romance of all time, besides the Before trilogy, of course. But I think that the reason that I love the stuff in space just as much, maybe not just as much, but almost as much as the stuff that's on Earth in the first act, is because this movie just gets more and more relevant every day. And ironically enough, same director tackles the themes that Toy Story 5 has, but in just an infinitely better way. And when I was a kid, like, I watched it and I got the environmental message, but now seeing just the commentary on the lack of connection in our world and the growth of technology and laziness, and showing the value and importance of connection and how that transcends any model of society. It's such a beautiful movie, both visually and thematically. These characters are amazing. It's so heartfelt and sweet. And I love this movie. I just love this movie so much. I don't know how you couldn't love this movie. I still, in a way, I can't believe Pixar made it. Like, yes, they are so good, but just even the anti-corporation themes, very ironic coming from Disney, but just its artsy elements and lack of dialogue. It's just such an amazing movie, and it's one of my favorites of all time, and it's the top on this list. That is my all 31 Pixar movies ranked from worst to best. Thank you so much for watching. I'm sure nobody's watching at this point, but continue to check out some of our other content. We have plenty of other reviews and rankings that are still frequently coming, as well as short films and a web series. So, but I guess I should really come up with an outro for these videos. I would be again like this. But when I think about this movie, I think when I think of this movie, when I think of this movie, the thing I think the most about is the terrible. When I think about when I think about this movie, the thing I think the most about. That is such a weird fucking. When I think about this movie, the thing that I think the most about is the really terrible villain